Okay, and what is a nafkamina?
Practical difference.
It is a case which is a practical case which shows the bifurcation of the two theories that we're dealing with. So we illustrated it with the case of salt. Let me ask you a question. Why is it that we use salt at the table at the time that we make hamotzi? Anybody have any idea?
It depends. Your perspective.
That's the lawyer answer.
Rashi says,
Rashi says,
so it tastes better, so we're more grateful.
so that the bread tastes better. As a result, we'll be able to make the blessing over the bread with more appreciation. Tosfos says, how can we summarize Tosfos' position in just 2 words?
Staying faithful.
What are the 2 words that we used yesterday?
Evil.
I have more than 2 words. To ward off satanic indictment.
Satanic indictment, right? It's to ward off the satanic indictment. Mike, could you please explain to us what the satanic indictment is about?
Can you come back to me?
I'd be happy to. And Justin, what is the satanic indictment?
One of God's closest angels, named Satan, likes to snitch on us Jews in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, you see those Jews? Why aren't they opening their lips up?
Oh. If we have idle time, we're not doing anything, then something evil can come in
and indict you.
Right.
Now, what happens when a person gets indicted? Where do they look?
Down.
Where do the indicters look?
Indictment.
Where do they look?
Do they look up? What they don't have?
They look into his ledger. What is in his ledger?
Remember when he did that?
Everything that he did during his lifetime. And it's date stamped.
Oh no, Eastern Standard Time?
Satan Standard Time. Right? It's date stamped. And they say, oh, he's not only guilty of that. Do you know what else this guy's been up to? And therefore, we always try to avoid such circumstances. Therefore, in order to neutralize the satanic indictment, what do we do?
I have a question.
I'm asking you a question. In order to neutralize the satanic indictment, what do? We put salt on the table. How does that neutralize the indictment?
It reaffirms the covenant with God.
Because the covenant of God is a covenant of NaCl. Salt. Anybody know NaCl? What?
I know chemistry. I got chloride.
Sodium chloride, right. It's a covenant of salt. And why do we call it a covenant of salt? Because salt does not decay, right? So this is an everlasting covenant.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you're saying Jews believe in Satan?
Did I say that? Did anybody hear me say that?
The secondary guy did, whatever, not Rashi, the other one, who believes in Kabbalah.
So the Kabbalistic explanation certainly does bring Satan into the picture.
But it's not in the Torah.
Well, it's in the Kabbalistic literature of the Torah.
But that's not in the Torah. Or the written Torah, correct? It's just commentary.
Well, there are passages in the written Torah which which indicate his existence.
So if
Yes.
God is all-knowing, why does it matter if one of his angels is saying, hey, what about this? Since God knows everything at all times.
Very good question. Ooh, we got a thinker here.
Send him away.
And of course,
Run
why?
him at the stake.
And of course, why is it that that they have to look into his ledger? God knows everything. He's omniscient. Even if you don't look into his ledger, whenever we have terms that we're using, either in Scripture or things that are described to us about God remembering, God looking into, and the like, this does not mean that he forgot or he is doing something, but rather what it means is he's acting on the information that is at hand. Now, fortunately for us, when God created the world, the bad news was he created the world with what we call the Midas Hadin. Midas Hadin means the attribute of strict justice. The attribute of strict justice says that when the person does the right thing, we reward him. And when he does the wrong thing, off with his head. So when God created the world, his first thought was to make it according to strict justice. But then he realized, so to speak, that the world would not really exist for very long because the first person he makes may for the first hour do everything great. And then one mistake and the ball game is over. So, in addition, he added what's called Midas Harachamim, the attribute of mercy. And most people today live by according to and through the attribute of mercy. The attribute of mercy says that don't take this person away. Wouldn't it be better if the individual just reforms his behavior and would keep him alive? And you're right, now he's doing the wrong thing. But you know what? If we give him some more time, maybe he'll learn to do the right thing. And once he learns to do the right thing, he'll shun that negative behavior, and now we have him on our side. So all you have to do is just keep him around a little bit longer, and maybe he will repent. So this is the attribute of mercy.
What's the Jewish word for karma?
Jews don't believe in karma.
How do you define karma?
Well, you just said before, like if you do good, you're rewarded. If you do bad, off with your head.
It's called reward and punishment.
So like karma, like what goes, like you put out something good, then good comes back into your life. If you put out something bad comes back into your life.
Is that the same as justice?
I would say that probably karma is closer to, more closely related to fate. Let me just double check. Definition of karma.
Here's the definition of karma. In Hinduism and Buddhism, the sum of a person's actions in this and previous states of existence, viewed as deciding their fate in future existences.
Fate, right. So what you've done now creates a fate for you. Right? We don't believe that, but we do believe in reward and punishment. I don't want to get involved in fate because fate challenges the notion of free will. And the Torah believes in free will. So we're talking about God remembering, God doing, and the like. This is talking about his acting on what he already knows. God is omniscient, but he doesn't always act immediately on what he knows. I was a principal for a number of years. One of the things I used to instruct my teachers is that a good teacher is someone who's blind in one eye and deaf in one ear. What did I mean by that?
Merciful.
Means that when you're viewing your class, of course you're going to find kids doing the wrong thing. But not every wrong thing that you see or hear do you have to act on. There are certain things which are egregious. You just can't allow and tolerate in the classroom. But there are other things that it's not right, but you can't harp on everything that's wrong, because otherwise you lose your ability to work with the students. So you choose and pick your battles, which are the things that are the important things to work on. The other things, you don't say you're allowed to do it, but you just make believe you didn't see it. You make believe you didn't hear it. Blind in one eye, deaf in one ear. What?
How do you know when to be blind and deaf versus to be seeing and hearing?
So you have to have a strong objective in your mind about what you want to accomplish with your classroom. But the truth of the matter is, this is not just for teachers. This is for parents also. Parents, to be effective parents, also have to be blind in one eye and deaf in one ear. Right? To go around and correct every mistake your child is doing, because you want to make sure your child is always going to do the right thing, right, and always maximize who they are, right? You're going to give your child an inferiority complex. So you're going to give him a sense of little self-worth. He's always being criticized.
Does this also apply to a marital relationship?
It absolutely to all human relationships, all human relationships, right? Yes.
If you're a teacher,
Yes.
what is
I
one
am.
example of? I mean, if you're in a classroom with 20 kids, what would be an example of something you turn a blind eye to?
Let's say that one of the students in your class who understands the material has a comic book under his desk, and he's reading his comic book. Right. My objective in the classroom is to make sure that one of the objectives is to know that all the students know the material. But he does know the material, so he's obviously bored, and it's very hard in a classroom situation to keep everybody occupied, because in a classroom situation, you're teaching to the center of the class, which means those who are superior are going to get bored, and those who are inferior still can't catch up and understand. So how many people are you actually reaching? So you're going to have to give a certain level of discretion to the people that do understand. Well, let's say that there's a kid who is doing something which is naughty in class, right? But I know that the child has difficulties at home. The parents are about to get divorced, and he's got other issues that he has to deal with, right? So to single him out for that kind of thing, he's not bothering the other students. He's just wasting his own time. I may not try to discipline him, but I may try to win him back with something interesting.
I used
So,
to be a teacher, so I can relate.
I'm sorry, what?
I used to be a teacher, so I can relate.
You can relate to that, right? Okay. So God, so to speak, I don't want to use this expression, but deals with us as if he's blind in one eye and deaf in one ear, because he's not going to always handle everything that we're involved with. But he's concerned about our trajectory. How is our trajectory in life? Are we going in the right direction in general? And he's going to be more concerned about keeping you on your trajectory than to nitpick for any one particular thing. Yes.
How?
Unless there's a satanic indictment. Now, once a satanic indictment happens, so then all bets are off. So let me. There are cases where you cannot so simply protect yourself from a satanic indictment. For instance, let's say that you go to the Grand Canyon and it's a windy day and you go to the edge and stand on a banana peel. Well, a satanic indictment might do you in, right? Because once a person puts himself into a situation of danger, so then the attribute of mercy is not necessarily going to create something miraculous for him. So if he's at the edge of the Grand Canyon, overlooking a cliff of 1.2 miles down, standing on a banana peel on a windy day, could be that the wind is going to be blowing into the canyon. It could be it's going to be blowing out of the canyon. Right? Satanic indictment, it can be tough to save you. So we always try to avoid putting ourselves into dangerous situations. We don't get anxiety ridden by that, what constitutes something which is dangerous, we don't go overboard. But when a person is in a dangerous situation, he goes to war. So then he could be subject to the satanic indictment. That's why, according to Jewish thought, anybody who is drafted into a war can get an exemption if he feels that he's not righteous enough to fight. There's a lack of righteousness deferment.
That's convenient.
How many people do you think will sign up for that?
For deferment?
For a lack of righteousness deferment.
That's what Rabbi Teitelbaum was talking about the other day.
What was he talking about?
He was saying, like, don't put off stuff you can do now. Like, if you're going to donate $1 million, like, if someone's going to donate $1 million to Mount Sinai, they would want it now.
Sinai retreats?
Yeah. What'd I say?
Mount Sinai. Okay. Sinai retreats?
Like, if someone's going to donate $1 million, like, they're going to want it now. They're not going to say, oh, yeah, sure, give me 20 years. Like, they don't want to defer it. So.
Okay, well, we're talking about a military deferment, which might be a little bit different than... You're right, normally we shouldn't defer. Being alacritous, striking while the iron's hot. Don't let yourself cool down. Seize the moment. Important things. Okay, so we had the bread. Rashi, taste. Tosas, satanic indictment. Tell me a nafka mina between Rashi and Tosas's view of salt at the table.
Difference of opinion.
Give me a nafka mina.
Pre-salted bread.
What would be if you had pre-salted bread? According to Rashi,
No salt.
no salt necessary. According to Tosas,
Salt necessary.
salt necessary. According to Rashi, why no salt?
Doesn't add to the taste.
He doesn't need to enhance the taste. It's enhanced. And according to Tosas,
Satanic indictment.
satanic indictment. You still have to have a reminder of the covenant of salt in front of you. Now, a reverse nafka mina. A reverse would be what? Where according to Tosas, you don't need salt, and according to Rashi, you would need salt. Just the reverse of what we had. Who can think of a reverso? A reverso pasado. What's a reverso pasado?
fencing
So the
maneuver.
example you said, someone might be on a low sodium diet, and the salt might not make it taste better for that person.
Would that be the reverse? Because according to Rashi, on the low sodium diet, would he have salt on his bread?
No.
No. And according to Tosas, do we need salt at the table?
Yes.
Yes. So it would be the same type of nafkamina, but we want to reverse, where according to Tosas you don't need it. And Justin is going to give it to us. Let's listen. Everybody please listen to Justin.
Is it the earbuds?
The earbuds. Let's hear the earbuds case.
Satan won't have nothing on us if we got lectures going on in our ears anyways, but he's going to still say nothing's coming out of the mouth.
And what's God going to say? Do you see those earbuds? He's connected to Torah.
So therefore, the satanic indictment wouldn't even have any room to make it a good, evident argument.
Good, and therefore, what's the story with the table?
Then we don't need salt.
We wouldn't need salt at the table. But according to Rashi,
Earbuds don't make it more flavor.
that's right, don't add more flavor to the bread, we would need salt. And the most obvious nafkamina between Rashi and Tosas is Jeff.
I have other questions before I can answer this question.
Honey.
So that's fine if you're the teacher. But if you're the student, you answer my question.
What was the question again? Well, it always depends, but what's the question?
The question
The
is,
other kind of nafkamina besides the earbuds one? The overhears?
so you didn't even hear my question.
No. I'm still thinking about how can you have an angel who's checking his list, but then God does it when you die anyways. And then you say God intervenes, but then God doesn't intervene. There's a lot of things that doesn't make sense with this Kabbalah stuff.
Well, I mean,
It's hard for me to understand this concept if I don't understand.
so if I was trying to tell you, this is the name of my book, Kabbalah Made Simple, or Kabbalah for Dummies, I would say you have a problem. But we're not trying to make it for dummies. We're just putting it out there, and granted, there are many more things that would have to be explained. But the most obvious nafkamina between Rashi and Tosas is
Physical versus spiritual.
that a nafkamina is a practical case. You're telling me an adjectival description. An adjectival description.
What?
Most obvious difference is one is actually ingesting and one's not ingesting.
Ingesting, right? According to Rashi, you have to ingest the salt, whereas according to Tosas, you do not ingest the salt.
Yes.
So far, so good? Okay. So this was yesterday, and now we're going to bring this concept back to what we were discussing originally yesterday, and that is concerning the 7-foot rule. Who recalls how the 7-foot rule works?
If something's within 7 feet of you
In a public space.
in a public space, then you can take ownership of it.
According to one view, if it's in public space, you automatically take ownership so long as you
Or have intent.
have intent to use the 7-foot rule to acquire something for you. You want to acquire it.
If it's private, then
If it's private property, it won't work. And according to the other school of thought, the 7-foot rule works under all conditions except for
When you waive the rights of the 7-foot.
when you indicate to us
Contrary.
contrary intent that you do not want to use the 7-foot rule. How could a person demonstrate contrary intent?
Pouncing.
Pouncing. If he pounces on the object, he clearly is indicating to us that he does not want to use the 7-foot rule. He has his own idea about how he wants to acquire it. If the second guy comes along and wrenches it out from under his gut, who gets it?
Wrencher.
The wrencher. Good. Okay. So now we're going to go back and let's talk. What would be the nafka mina between these two schools of thought about the 7-foot rule?
What would be the nafka?
And again, nafka mina is not an adjectival description, but rather a concrete case which shows the bifurcation of the two theories.
My brain hurts.
Okay.
If you want something.
Smoke rising from under the yarmulke.
One is intent, 7-foot, public.
Can you rephrase the question? What is the practical difference between?
Tell me a nafka mina between these two schools of thought regarding the 7-foot rule.
So let's recap. According to A, school of thought A,
Uh-huh.
if you're in a public space and you have the intent to acquire an object, as long as you're 7 feet within the object, you can claim ownership of it.
Correct.
According to school of thought B, if you're in a public space and you're within 7 feet of the object,
Did we make any distinctions about...
public-private, no.
So let's leave that out.
In school of thought B, if you're within 7 feet, the 7-foot rule doesn't count if you break the 7-foot rule by indicating contrary intent.
I will offer that.
Here it is. We need a little bit of a drum roll for the nafka mina.
Pressure's on. Let's say you're walking in a public space and you see an object and you say, I want that Rolex, and then you pounce on it. Is that enough, Kamina?
Let's speak it out.
So
According to
one rule, you're in a public space. You're within 7 feet, and you declare your intent. You say out loud, "I want that." So by one rule, do you own that item? Yes. And then in the other rule, if you've pounced on it, even though you're in a public space within 7 feet and declared intent, you've made a contradictory action. So you waive your 7-foot rule rights, and you don't have ownership based on that rule.
But then you lift it up. 3.
No,
separate.
okay. So that's an excellent groundwork that you're making over here. Let's just make it a little bit more efficient.
Okay.
And that would be that what would be if you pounce on a Rolex that a bird just dropped on public property. Bird drops the Rolex on public property, and you pounce on it. According to the view,
So according to the 7-foot rule in public, you've pounced and declared intent. Or even if you don't pounce, you get ownership.
you get ownership.
It
You're within 7 feet of it.
Right.
You automatically get ownership.
Right.
And according to the other school of thought,
Because you pounced, you waive the automatic 7-foot rule ownership.
that's right. Pouncing indicates that you don't want to use the 7-foot rule, and therefore you're not going to get ownership of it. So pouncing on a lost object in an unowned property will be a nafka mina between the two. One view would say you do get it, and one view would say you don't get it.
Okay.
Let's talk about a reverse nafka mina.
So what action do you have to take, or what has to happen for?
Reverse nafka mina is where, according to that view, it's going to go the opposite. According to the first view, you wouldn't get it. According to the second view, you would get it.
So in our case, pouncing.
It's the reverso passado.
So how can we pounce and still own it? That's the question.
What if you're in private property and you don't pounce? No, I don't think
Private
so.
You're
I don't
on
think
private.
so. Probably are.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. If you're on private property,
No, the 7
you're
foot.
private property and you don't pounce, you
Right.
just stand next to it.
Right. Then
According to the view,
in the first case now is a no. You don't have ownership. anymore
why?
Because you're on private
You're on
property.
private property. You can't 7-foot rule doesn't work on private property.
Right.
And according to the second view,
If you pick it up let's say you pick it up
with
instead.
7-foot rule, we're not picking anything
You
up.
don't have to pick it up, yeah.
According to the second view,
In the second view, it's private. You still don't own it.
Yeah, you still don't know.
and sure you do, because according to the second view, the only time the 7-foot rule does not obtain is if you pounce.
If you pounce.
Because pouncing shows that you don't want to use the 7-foot rule. But if you don't show us that you don't want to use the 7-foot rule, the 7-foot rule is automatically going to work for you. Does the second view make any distinction between public and private property? None whatsoever. And so therefore, you could be any place, according to the second view. As long as you're not pouncing, you get it. Now, but according to the first view, you can't get it when you're on private property. So we're going to have to move it to private property. So if you're on private property and you don't pounce, you just stand next to the Rolex, you are the owner of that Rolex. What time is it?
According to the second view.
Yeah, according to the second view, what time is it?
12:31.
12:31. Because we have to get there, you have to get you open there for like 12:35.
Uh-oh.
I mean, we're going to dismiss at 12:35.
Sign the retreat times.
Sign retreat time. Okay. Okay. So now we hear the nafkamina between the two?
Yes.
Okay. Is it crystallized now in your mind?
Almost.
Almost. Right? But it does require a certain amount of mental horsepower.
Mm-hmm.
Good. You guys are great.
One more. Come on.
Okay. Now that we know the nafkamina, we're going to have to push this one more step forward. And that is, why does the first school of thought make a distinction between public and private property? It seems that that is a very arbitrary distinction that school of thought is making by saying public property, the 7-foot rule does work. Private property, the 7-foot rule doesn't work. I mean, why do we make such a distinction?
Because there has to be boundaries somewhere.
You want to be able to leave your
Well,
soccer balls in your backyard.
Okay, but here, let me intensify the question then. According to the second school of thought, is there any distinction between public and private property?
No.
There is no distinction. Under all circumstances, as long as you don't show contrary intent, you will get something and it'll be yours by just standing next to it, even if it's on private property. So in what sense is the first school of thought rejecting the second school of thought's position that there's a distinction between public and private property? Clearly the second view doesn't subscribe to that distinction. The first view does subscribe to that distinction. Why? In what is it that they are arguing? This is called the Nakudas Hamachlokus, the point of contention between the two views. And we have to crystallize in our mind what is that point that they're arguing about. And of course, it's going to have to be a point about law. There's one view holds that legally there is an issue, and the other one holds it's not. We're going to have to get to the bottom of that. That's going to be our next exploration. Mm-hmm. The Nakudas Hamachlokus. Exactly what is that point? A Nakuda is a point. What is that point in contention between the two? In order to be able to answer that question, what we need to do is to go into an issue concerning how a law works. We're going to call this the mechanism. The mechanism. Now, everything in life has a mechanism. The old-time watches, why did they tell the time?
It's the gears turn.
The gears turn. The mechanism is because of the gears. The newfangled watches, why do they tell the time?
Chips, electricity.
Because they have chips. So it's a different mechanism between the two. What's the nafkamina between the old-time watch and the new-time watch? Whether or not you need a battery. According to the new-time watch, you're going to need a source of electricity because it uses a chip. Whereas according to the old-time watch, you don't need a source of electricity. Why not?
Mechanical.
It's got a mechanical movement. Right? You have to wind it up. That'll be another nafkamina. Do you have to wind up your watch or not wind up your watch? So everything in life has a mechanism. And it's always, for me, it's a very interesting and satisfying study to try to figure out the mechanism of why things do what they do. I love that. Because it's not only about objects, it's about people. Why will a person get angry at me if I say this? Why will a person appreciate me if I say that? What's going on in their mind? How come this husband and wife can't get along with each other? What is the mechanism that's creating the enmity between the two?
Miscommunication.
Outlook.
So we have to isolate it, right? Because through an inquiry, you're going to have to figure out exactly why that's happening. So I love mechanisms. Now, in terms of laws, the laws have a mechanism. So we're going to get involved in the very beginning over here of the mechanism of this law concerning the 7-foot rule. So let me give you a little bit of background. We talked about, remember the 3 hand breaths? It's a symbolic act. If I pick something up 3 hand breaths off the ground, then I become the owner of it, so long as I have the intent that I want to take possession. I need 2 things, symbolic act plus intent to acquire. There are many types of symbolic acts. One of them is called chutzner. A chutzner is a courtyard. Your courtyard acquires things for you, according to Jewish law, under certain circumstances. Let me give you an example. Let's say that the paper boy comes by every afternoon and throws the evening paper on your doorstep. Got it? Your neighbor's dog comes out before you get home, takes the paper and eats it. You come home and you see a half-eaten newspaper on your doorstep. Who do you go to? Do you go to the paper boy and claim that you didn't get the paper? Or do you go to your neighbor and claim that your neighbor's dog ate the paper and you want compensation from your neighbor?
Well, that's tough. Do you know the dog ate the paper? Or
You can see the salivated edges of the paper, and you know how slobbery your neighbor's dog is. You've done a DNA match on the saliva.
And video camera.
Alright, so you have DNA evidence.
It's the slobby neighbor's dog.
Go to both and tax them both. No,
Okay, so depending on the person, you have one person that might go to the newspaper boy and say, hey, next time you deliver the paper, can you please put it like on top of my car so the dog can't get it? Or then you'd have another person that would get mad and go to the neighbor and scream at them about what their dog did. So there's
Okay, so, but according to Jewish law, it's all going to boil down to the following. When the paper landed on your doorstep, was it yours yet? Or is it still the paper boy's paper? Meaning,
By Jewish law, that's the paperwork.
maybe it's the paper boy's until you pick it up. Or do we say that no, your yard acquired it for you, and therefore it's your paper, and the neighbor's dog has now offended your paper?
So can property
In which case, your argument is against the neighbor, not against the paper boy. So we would have to know, can your front step acquire objects for you, even when you're not there? Let's say, for instance, mail in your mailbox. According to American law,
not even ours, federal government.
the mailbox belongs to the federal government. And when an object, when the mailman puts in the mail in your mailbox,
Federal government's.
you don't own it yet until you go out to the mailbox and pick it up. Do you know that according to this, if you, let's say, have, let's say you owe somebody $10 and they're not home, you can't put a check in their mailbox? Because if you do, you're violating federal law by invading the space that the federal government has in that mailbox.
Yeah, that's true.
But people do it, and I've never heard of anybody being prosecuted because of it. But I think they overlook that one. They're deaf. They're deaf in one eye about that one. Get it? Deaf in one eye. They're blind in one ear. Okay, they don't prosecute that, but it is really their space. So now, according to Jewish law, your yard does acquire things for you.
So just to confirm, in Jewish law, property is agency, right?
So that is a very, very good question. How does it acquire for you? What's the mechanism?
Agency.
Is it because your property is considered your agent? It's considered like an extension of your hand, and therefore, just like your hand can acquire something, your property can acquire something? Or maybe not. It's not considered your agent. It's just another valid method of acquisition. Yard. We will explore this issue tomorrow and bring it back to our discussion concerning the 7-foot rule. And in the meantime, gentlemen, all hands on deck in the triangle room.
No. Wait, so Rabbi, what's the